And then he pounded his fist on the table and he said, "Holy expletive, you just saved me $30 million. And I said, "I'll take 10%. And he ignored that. A good businessman, like a bad businessman than I am. So he said, so I said, "What happened?" And he said, "I've never thought about this, but 1,200 of our employees are on headphones every day, every hour. They're IT people, they're call center people, because it's a place like before the internet got really big, it was a big call center, worldwide call center." He said they never talk to each other. He said they would rather, we don't need to have them, like have one meeting a week. They can work from their home or work from a satellite center. He said, "We don't have to build 25% of this building." So that happened because we actually went up here to actually look at the core belief or the principles or the philosophy of how the company was operating. And it only took 5 minutes to save them $30 million. So it's very powerful if we can actually start at the top. And this is what we did in this project. So with this project, we are actually working with a deeper understanding of purpose. That it's not just about what you're doing, the purpose is also how you are being. Now that's a very strange concept to bring into architecture. But in terms of changing the world or creating a project that is meaningful to the community, or a community actually understanding why the project is important, the being aspect is how we are in a relationship. How are you being with your family? How are you being with your friends? How are you being with yourself? So let me give you an example. I'm going to do this tomorrow night in more detail. I'm giving you a lecture tomorrow night. But I'm going to give you a simple example of a purpose statement and show you how powerful this is. And I'm going to use the example of making dinner. People say, "Why would you actually make making dinner so complex? Just make the dinner." So let's think about what goes into making dinner. And I'm going to be non-politically correct. To give you So I'm going to take raw ingredients. This is the functional transformation. We have to do things, right? I'm going to take raw ingredients and prepare a meal for my family. Okay? So far, so good. Now, what's the being state? In a way that shows my family how much I hate them. Because I never wanted to have kids in the first place. How's that dinner going to be? Pretty bad dinner, right? Is that the dinner I want to have? Nope. But I bet you can think of families that have dinners like that, don't you? Hopefully not too many. But nonetheless, we know that there are. So what's the purpose of dinner? You see that dimension of being with the family is really important. Now, I'm going to do it in a way that I think is really good, that I would want for my family. I'm going to take raw ingredients, transform those ingredients into a meal for my family, in the way that we share our love for each other, or at least our daily events, around the table. Why are we doing that? Why am I taking the time to make dinner? Why am I taking the time to spend time with my family around the table? So that, what's the reason I'm doing it? The purpose of the purpose. The reason I'm making dinner and spending time with my family is so that our children have the psychological well-being and nourishment to grow into responsible adults. That's why, as a parent, I'm really taking the time to make dinner and spending time with my family. If I didn't have that purpose, I could grab a bag of hamburgers from McDonald's, throw it at them, and say, "Get out of here! I'm going to go watch the TV. I'm going to have a drink of mezcal." Right? So do you see how these dimensions are important? Okay. So with that in mind, this is how we began this billion-dollar wastewater treatment plant. By understanding that not only to ourselves, who we are inside, are we able to get along with ourselves? Do we love ourselves enough to be able to love others that we're working with? To be able to have effect on the world? What is the purpose of our work? And from a context of sustainability, it requires us to understand who we are in order to actually act on others. If I am a guy that goes out and hates my neighbors and shoots my neighbors' dogs, I'm probably not going to be a very good environmentalist. That make sense? Or if I drop bombs on people, I probably don't really care about life too much. So who we are inside and who our organization is has effect on the world. So when we went to Metro Vancouver, we found out that they had an incredibly deep vision statement for sustainability. But like many of these vision statements, no one paid attention to it because they did not know how to activate it. All these nice sounding words. And so we actually developed a purpose statement. And let me just share with you a couple things that were important. I won't read the whole thing. But we spent 2 months with the administration, with the project management team, working on this purpose statement before. Now, I need to give you some background. This was a 2-year project, a design process. It was design, concept design. It was a 2-year project. We didn't get started. We were supposed to start in January 2011. We didn't get started until July because of the slowness of bureaucracies. And we still had to finish on time because, of course, they never give you slack, right? You got to finish on time. So we started in July. We spent 2 months with the project management team working on this. And here are the things we agreed on, that we were going to use an integrative process that guides and inspires higher performance. We're going to engage project participants to experience, the very important word, our role in the water cycle and how the business of wastewater management works. So here's the fun one, so that the wastewater treatment plant becomes a community asset. Not just a slightly less smelly factory surrounded by a brick wall with concertina wire, which is the typical wastewater treatment plant, correct? So how can this become so much more? How can we go from 4x grasshopper to 10x grasshopper? So we developed principles from this, and then we actually took this purpose statement to all the communities and to all the members of the design team to get their alignment around this, and it became further refined. That took 4 more months. Now we're 6 months into a project that we already started 6 months late. We're a year behind, and the political leadership invited us, me and my partner, into his office to fire us because we were wasting time. Where's the design? We need to see this design. Now, we actually had a contract that said all major financial and political leadership must participate in every workshop. And they were going to fire us, and we said, well, you know, that's acceptable, but you owe us our entire fee because you're in breach of contract. Because you don't understand what's going on because you haven't participated. Well, we're not going to, that's not our job to participate. Yes, it is. It's in the contract. We made that clear when we negotiated. So you can fire us or pay us the whole fee, or you can keep us on and see what kind of effect results. And they kept us on. Wasn't very happy, but the design team was very happy. The community was very happy. And we developed project principles. Because principles are guides to action. Remember, belief, philosophy, principles? So that purpose statement became the belief and philosophy. The principles now are the guides to action, so that we're all pulling our oars in the same direction. Think big. What does that mean? Well, we had spent 6 months discussing what think big means, so the team knew that. And what we were doing is we weren't focused on the wastewater treatment plant, we were focused on the community and the ecosystem. And I won't go through those principles. To manage this process, we actually had to have meetings, and then we identified research, and then more meetings, and then research so that people actually knew where we were going. And we had, in terms of the typical design process, first big workshop, that's that dot. The second workshop is that dot. And then we mapped out all the meetings in between, all the deliverables, all the analysis and research, so that people actually didn't start designing. Because the engineers said to us in the beginning, we know how to design a wastewater treatment plant. Why are we spending this time? We know what to do. We can give you an answer right now. We said, no, this plant has a bigger purpose. And so the engineers were very frustrated, but once we actually mapped this out, they could see that there was a reason for this, and we mapped this out with the entire team, and then we did this, and you can't see this, but there are 320 separate deliverables for this big project that took basically, well, almost 2 weeks to map out. But then once we had that roadmap, everybody knew where we were going. Let's skip this slide. So we had this site in Vancouver, but in fact that wasn't the site. That's the site. And so to engage with that, we actually had to slow down the process so that we could understand the hydrology and the geology and the fauna and the animal life and the culture. And then we were able to actually start thinking about the site, which is on an estuary called Burrard's Inlet in Vancouver, and that's a 3.5 hectare site in what was formerly a coastline, now an industrial area. The typical way we do this work is we take all the little elements, liquid waste, drinking water, regional parks, air quality, etc., and we kind of glue them together. Like, you're all familiar with LEED, the rating system? Okay, there's a bunch of points, and you kind of glue them together. That isn't the way life works. These items don't equal that, just like the organs in a body don't equal this little girl. If I took all the organs in your body, I'm going to pick on Raoul, and Raoul's body, and I put them in a pot and stir them around, do I get Raoul? No, you don't. A whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And the same thing with this place. That place is a living place. It's alive. It doesn't procreate like a mammal, but it does have a uniqueness. We certainly know Vancouver is different than Mexico City. What, right? Different than New York. I mean, this is obvious. Why is it different? And unless we can understand why it's different, not just the pieces, just like when I understand Raoul, I don't look at the condition of his liver to understand Raoul. I look at Raoul as a living entity. And we need to understand it. So then I can describe Raoul, the essence of Raoul, the distinctiveness, the uniqueness of Raoul. And therefore, this one was one of the unique ones. Intertidal exchange was one of the core process of how life works in that particular place. This little girl might want to be a dancer. But if you as a parent try to make her into a professional tennis player, what's that going to do to her? It's going to screw her up, right? Are you following this?
Yes.
So we're talking about life here. And we're not used to working with life. We're used to working with mechanical things. But by working with life and working with people, we actually have a way of working with core issues that all life can be seen as an activating and a restraining force. We typically compromise. You give up a little, I give up a little, and we end up hardening this shit. You lose, I lose, and then we compromise again and we lose further. You lose, I lose, you lose, I lose. Compromise is a slow way to die. It is not, should not be in our lexicon. It should not be in our vocabulary. We only should be working to harmonize and reconcile. And the only way that I harmonize with Raoul, for instance, is not looking at his liver and talking about his liver or energy or water. I talk about Raoul and who he is and what he needs in life, just like we need to talk about what this place needs. So it's a brownfield site that we want to transform it into a park, or we want to transform it into fresh water. That's the kind of core things. And so we were able to come up with concepts with this thinking. And you see that intertidal wetland, luminous breathing organism, what the heck do these mean? But the design team came up with these concepts as generators of meaning. And generators of meaning with the community, so the community could say, yes, we see this place as a place of exchange, like a flea market. We see this place as we don't want to have to reinvent it, rebuild this place in 20 years. We need to build it for 100 or 300 years. We want it to be cost effective, like there's a TV program in Canada called Dragon's Den, which is a business program. We want it to be an urban ecology, or an urban garden, or a network. And all these ideas generated 9. So these concepts then came out in January of 2012. Is that right? I'm wrong. January 2013, started in 2012. 2013, we are now a year behind, according to the leadership. And within 1 month after these concepts coming out, we actually jumped 14 months in schedule. By February, we were actually 2 months ahead of schedule, the original schedule. Because all the thinking had been done. There were no more arguments. There was only potential. There was pulling these people forward. The engineers describe this as the greatest design process that they've ever participated in. And now I'm actually pulling these slides from talks they're giving around the world, because they say, we just gave a talk in Portland a week ago, Portland, Oregon, and the chief engineer got up, the client got up, the chief architect got up, and all of them said it was the greatest project that they ever worked on. And I would say it was the greatest project I've ever worked on too, because so much more came out of this. It became a source of fresh water. It wasn't a secondary wastewater treatment plant anymore. And basically the concepts were, like an intertidal wetland, this concept will celebrate and extend the complex overlaps between the wastewater treatment plant process, tidal phases, downstream impacts, hydrological cycles, and nutrient exchange. You see it's so much bigger than a wastewater treatment plant now, because we're engaging with the nature of life in that place. Luminous breathing organism is a distinct, visible, self-sufficient character, constantly engaging with the public and community. That was compelling, and it pulled people. No longer was this project just a push, it was actually pulling people ahead. Dragon's Den, make it cost effective. So we were told at the beginning of this project that money was going to drive it. You always hear that, right? Money drives everything?
Yes.
And I'm going to say that is totally wrong. Totally wrong. So let's talk about that premise and the concept of sustainability. We have all the technologies we need for a sustainable planet right now. What prevents us from getting there? What prevents us from being sustainable right now? So your cost over there, what else? Affordable. Interest, meaning are the people interested in it, right? So my premise is that cost is never an issue, even though people say it is. I think it's will. We don't have the will to actually make the big decisions. Now when I was in college, and I was in college at New York State, and I had a girlfriend in California. That's about 3,000 miles away. I didn't have any money, but I made it to California a lot. And why was that? I had will. Money was not the issue. I hitchhiked, I borrowed cars, I took, I hitched rides with friends. You can do it. I have never seen money be the issue, and this project proves this too. So I'll give you the punchline, but let me just finish. So we actually compressed these to 3 schemes, ultimately compressed it to 1 scheme. Now, this scheme was, let me see if I can just, this is the plant here, but it actually became this is not the typical sewage treatment plant you see. But what we did is, because people actually understood that something was more important here, this plant was originally budgeted for $450 million, and that was 10 years ago. Prices always change. This came in at $780 million. You would think that would have actually, and we were told money was going to drive everything, just like, we all think it does. When this went for approval, money was never even mentioned. It wasn't discussed at all. How come? The reason it wasn't discussed is just because it wasn't discussed when I had to go see my girlfriend in California. Because we just need it, we want it. The community benefited from this. The water is fresh. Only 2% of the change orders, only 2% of all the money they allocated for change orders was spent. It was a unanimous approval because the values of the community were met in this. The community was transparently engaged. Originally, they were going to actually, with eyedroppers, give the community bits of information. We opened it up to the entire community, so there was interchange and dialogue and relationship. It was approved by permit 18 months faster than expected. So in fact, and it's the first unanimous approval of an infrastructure project in Canadian history. So this happened because we slowed down the design process to get people aligned around potential. going much higher than we expected, changing the behaviors of the people engaged so that we are actually working together as a team. And this is what people loved about this project, is we came together as a family. We had 14 charrettes over a year and a half. Every time it was like getting together with friends. And there were arguments and there was passion, but we had tremendous love for each other. We encouraged new perspectives, and we found synergies. And I love the way the architect described this. We don't know whose hand this is. We don't know whether it's a landscape architect, a project manager, an architect. It didn't matter. Because the test of a good project is no one knows who designed it. It came out of the core of people engaged. All right, that's all I'm going to talk about right now, because that's my half hour. So I hope this stirs the pot a little. If you have questions, I'd love to field them, and there's lots of practical issues that need to be addressed. It's how do you actually deliver something like this? So, Luis, I'll stop. I don't know who to talk to.
I have a question.
You have a question? Should we turn on lights? Wait. First of all, any reflections on that? Any thoughts? Reactions? Like, why are you telling us this stuff?
Well, yes. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. We don't need to hear from this guy.
I really like when you said that most of people, the first thing they engage while developing a new project is, well, just talking about the design.
Yeah.
And, well, it's actually, but that's wrong. I mean, the way you show us and explain that there's a whole lot of other process behind it, well, it made me really think that we should spend way more time in the analysis before actually getting into the design.
Yeah, we say go slow to go fast. Because we actually deliver our projects about 10% faster than the competition.
I think what mostly freaks people out is the time, because time is money.
It does.
And mostly, well, everywhere, mostly in the construction, talking about construction, sorry, you have to be quick. You have to deliver, and the action is like people just giving you the money needs to see results.
Yep.
But I think that's what is difficult about this kind of thinking. I don't think it is bad. I don't know how to say it. But I think it's the correct way to do things, but we have to make people understand that it is, because we don't have the example. They only see the project, but they don't know how it was designed.
You're absolutely correct, and it's the hardest thing we have to do in our practice is help people understand the potential of working this way. I'd like to spend some time talking about that this morning. Other reflections? Thoughts? Okay, to the back.
Well, I think it's pretty interesting.
Sorry, I'm not asking your names. What's your name?
Elias.
Elias, what's your name?
Yair.
Yair, I can't pronounce that.
Alberto.
Yair?
Alberto.
Okay. And yours?
Adrian.
Adrian? Oh, well. Elias.
Thank you. Well, I think it's pretty interesting to hear about the process you went through to get this project done, but it'd be also interesting or relevant to hear what happened with this project, if they are using it the way you expected they were going to use it, or what was the situation you're confronting right now with the project
Right.
you designed.
Yeah. Proof is in the pudding, right? You say. Does that work in Mexico? So past history, selling this, we get that. So thank you for those questions. Okay, Raul?
Yes, what do you need to do to reconnect as hearing systems works like reconnecting? By what or how? And at the end, I would like you to tell us how to approach the readings that we delivered just after.
Oh, well, that's right. Okay, we'll kind of handle that at the end. So let me pick up Elias's answer, and then, Jair?
Jair.
Say that again?
Yeah.
Jair? Jair.
Yeah, you got it.
So this was a 2-year process for concept design. That's as far as we took it. Big project, lots of stakeholders, complex work. It will be delivered in 2021 is when the design will be done. The next step is to create it's a 2,500 page document. If you get paid by the pound, you would be a millionaire. And the instructions are, oh, by the way, it is a much more complete, they call it indicative design, delivery that they've also ever achieved before. Less time, less money was spent, faster permit approval, and a more complete design. Because we aimed. You know that expression, ready, fire, aim? Isn't that generally what we do in our culture? Just get it done. And what we did is we took time to aim properly. This is an aiming process. So it has a lot of legs on it, Elias. You know, there's a lot of momentum. Is it going to be delivered as it is? We think so, but you never know. We built in a lot of indicators of success, like if you don't hit this level of performance, if you don't engage the community this way, then it may fall apart. But there's a lot of weaknesses in our complex system. The project management team may change. In fact, they're already changing. And the new project manager may say, this was a waste of time, just get the thing built. Now, likely it will be built well, but it may not continue to engage the community. And the real secret sauce of this kind of work is that you have to be continually, every 6 weeks or 8 weeks or so, engaging the community and the design team to lift up their potential, because people fall back into business as usual. We haven't changed the paradigm of design yet in our culture. So part of the nature of engagement, and we may actually be re-engaged, is to actually help people see the potential. Does that make sense? Okay. That's the best I can do for that one. How do you sell this stuff? With great difficulty. Because people are interested in what you're going to do for them, not how they're going to think differently. And, however, there are enough people out there that know that what we are doing doesn't work. You know that Greek definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again the same way, and yet expecting a different result? That's kind of what we're doing in our culture. Even with LEED projects, or Living Building Challenge projects, or biomimicry, we're still designing our buildings in the same process with a little bit of green bolted on. That's why it's more expensive. By the way, we build LEED Platinum buildings at typically 2% less than conventional construction because we find synergies. There are enough case studies out there now, and we have a whole book on the subject, on multiple projects, which I could spend time talking about, that are actually show it can be done, but here's the rub. In order to do different things, okay, pay attention to this one. In order to do different things, or in order to do things differently, we have to do the process differently. If you do the same old design process, you're going to get the same results. So we actually have to change the nature of the process, which is fundamentally what I was talking to you today about. And that's when people get nervous, because, well, I've never seen this process before. How am I going to, and that's why we were almost fired. This is a new process. This is scary. This is frightening. And the best thing you can do now is turn people over, and you're welcome to use our projects. Here's how it's been done. Talk to the clients that have actually done it, because they're enthusiastic about it, because they've been through it. They've experienced it. And the more and more we get, the more and more comfortable it's going to be for all of us to sell this work. So it's a bit of a cop-out answer. It's hard. But we don't try to convert people anymore. We don't try to make them feel guilty, because that doesn't work. We find people who are interested in change right now, and there are enough clients out there that are interested in change. This client knew they had to do something differently, because they were for the first time hiring an architect and an engineer is a separate contract. So we need somebody to help integrate that, and that's why they started. But they only thought we were going to facilitate. They didn't realize that we were going to redesign the design process. So we actually forced that on them. And here's the other thing, don't ask permission to do the right thing. They'll say, can I design a sustainable building? No? Okay, I won't. I mean, do you ask permission to do a beautiful building? Can I do a beautiful building? No? Okay, I won't. Come on. You sneak it in, right? Our clients don't know everything that we know, or else they wouldn't be hiring us. If they knew it, then you'd say, go do the job yourself. But don't tell us how to do our job. And I don't mean to be mean about this. And we want the client to participate. It's a full participation process. But that's the difference, is we want to be in dialogue. We want to have purpose. And actually, that's really motivating to clients when they finally see that they have power, and they're not beholden to some architect saying, what do you think about this? Okay, that's a personal perspective. Is that making sense? Okay. Luis,
Yes,
you're going to beat me up?
I will switch a little bit in Spanish.
Okay.
You can understand.
Ah,
Me parece muy interesante e importante lo que mencionó al principio de la plática, que todo surge del self, de conocerse, y a partir de ahí surge todo. Y de esto se trata el taller, cómo conocerse ustedes mismos, cómo van a cambiar su manera de pensar, cómo van a adquirir esta conciencia. Precisamente yo creo que cuando vemos hacia adentro es donde realmente cambiamos el paradigma y podremos lograr estos cambios. Entonces, durante todo el taller tengan esta conciencia de ir hilvanando estos conceptos que se van a ir tocando desde distintos ángulos, pero que tienen mucho que ver.
I got some of that. But basically saying we have to know ourselves. Is that what you were saying?
Yes, exactly.
Indeed. And our clients have to know themselves too. And can I share with you another story? I'm going to share this tomorrow night, but I think in context it's useful. So we have talking about the purpose statement, it's so elegant that you can get people to think not only about what they want to do, but who they are. And you don't have to make people feel guilty. You don't have to make people feel weird or awkward. Just who do you need to be? Who are you? Why are you doing this? And people typically never think about that. It's really, we call it gently destabilizing. And when you destabilize anybody, they have to think, well, what's going on here? And they ask a question. And when you ask a question, that's when we learn. We only learn when we have a question. So this client came to us. They're a very wealthy couple from Manhattan, multimillionaires, in their late 50s, early 60s, and they're buying a 75 hectare, 100 hectare farm in Connecticut. Now, I don't know how many of you know, there's an old television show in the United States from the 60s called Green Acres. Did you hear that? Yeah, it's not a surprise. Anyway, it was Eva Gabor and Eddie Albert. They're rich Manhattan socialites, and they moved to the farm because they want to be farmers. And they have no clue how to farm, and it's slapstick comedy. That's about as far as it goes. But all I could see was green acres in my mind when I saw this couple. A rich Manhattan couple wanting to be farmers. And you know what's going to happen in a year or two? They're going to say, oh, I hate this. So, and did they really know what they were doing? They had no clue what they were doing. But they thought, we have money, we can do anything. So I couldn't really, as an architect, I couldn't say to them, are you sure you want to be a farmer? Really? And what would they say? We're the client, you're the architect, do what we want. We're hiring you to design us a farmhouses and all that. So we said, good, well, let's do a purpose statement to begin, just to make sure we're in alignment and you actually understand what you're about. So I said, go home and do a function and your being state and what's your purpose of your purpose. They went home and they came back a week later and they said, Well, we want to have a sustainable farm, and where we are in relationship with our family as a place of refuge, intergenerational, where we can show the world how organic farming is profitable, show the community how to farm organically. I said, okay, that's pretty nice. I can't argue with anything. That's very noble. It's not my business to try to change your mind. But I can say that I know 20 other couples in Manhattan that could say the exact same thing. So I want to know what's really unique to you. Because that's general statement, sustainability, organic farming, intergenerational home. So I want you to go home, and the only thing I could think about asking was that if you're working with a system, and we're talking systems thinking here, we're not talking objects. They wanted a farmhouse. I'm seeing a living system, and they actually kind of wanted us to engage in this living system of a farm, and how do you become part of the community? So I said, and in order to work with a system, you can't think about it. You have to image it. You have to run a movie in your mind. How does the system work? What's happening here and there? Even if you're making a watch, how is this cog fitting in with that spring and that activator? You see it working in your mind, and that way you can see what needs to be fixed or how to make it better. So I said, go home and image, run a movie of your life on this farm every hour for a week. 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, on Monday morning, 8 o'clock. And come back. They said, cool, we'll go home and do that. So they went back, came back a week later, and I said, so what happened? And the husband said, I don't want to be a farmer anymore. And I said, well, cool, so what's that about? He said, don't get me wrong, I want this farm, but I know that I'm too old to, bale the hay and move the heavy equipment around, so I've got to hire a farm manager. That's great. All of a sudden now the program has changed. Now it's a farm compound. But if we had designed what they wanted, a year later they would have said, why did you let us do this? Why didn't you tell us, architect? Well, how do we know? They know the answer. We have to actually source it from them. So he didn't want to be a farmer anymore, but he needed the farm stuff, and we had to have a farm manager hired, and that was part of the big part of the work. So I turned to the wife. What happened with you? She said, I can't quote what she said because it's really embarrassing. She said, I am so blankety blank, blank off. You can fill in the words. So I said, whoa. She said, no, I'm not mad at you. She said, I got up. I said, so what happened? She said, I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning to feed the chickens. Never mind. And I didn't know what the blank I was doing. I need help. Now we're at the beginning of a design process that's meaningful. We are co-discovering meaning together. And as a result, the project became an entirely different project that was actually meaningful to them and very exciting. It wasn't just here tell the architect what to do. So when I say don't ask permission, I don't mean be a jerk. I mean engage with your client as co-creators. And I think more sustainable and actually more rich and long-term and viable solutions will emerge.
You have been talking about thinking, thinking systems. Where do you rest this work in order to know that you are accurate or near where you need to be?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know if I know the answer to that. Did you all hear Raul's question? Where? So could you actually say that to him in Spanish?
Sí, Bill nos ha estado básicamente diciendo sobre el pensamiento técnico o cómo pensar diferente para hacer las cosas diferentes, cómo cambiar los procesos. Pero cómo sabe uno, cómo uno puede tener cierta certeza que lo que uno está haciendo es lo adecuado.
So how do I know I'm on the right track?
Where do you rest all your thinking in order to know if you are in the in state or in the relation where, because thinking could take you anywhere.
Yes.
As these people did.
So the one thing that I test, because I have an ego. Do you have an ego? I hope you do. I hope it's not an attached ego. We all need our egos. We just don't need it to be attached to things. And when I find myself saying, ooh, they don't like me, or they aren't listening to what I'm saying, or why don't they believe me, I realize that I'm attached to my own ego. That I'm not helping them, I'm actually helping myself. And that's the wrong place to begin a co-creative process. So, and if I am concerned about it, I should express that to them. Here's what, and be very transparent. So I find that when we are in true dialogue, learning from each other, that there is a sense of respect, and I might dare say love for each other, that allows us to be creative. If that's not there, I think we're pushing a rock uphill. Sisyphus, right? Keep pushing, it's going to fall back down. Because if you're using your own will to push something ahead, an architect is a master builder, right? You know, you've all probably read The Fountainhead, that kind of, if you haven't, probably shouldn't. But, you know, where the architect is this master creator. Get that out of your minds. The only thing that's going to last is to be a co-creator. Yes, you might be published in World Architecture, and you get medals, and you'll be a hero, but in terms of, and that's okay if that's what you want, but if we want sustainability, if we want a planet that's we're actually in a relationship with each other, we have to get out of our own way and ego. So the way that we test that in our group is are we actually co-learning? One of the signs, we used to put up a sign in our workshops, no experts, only co-learners. Because that was just an immediate check. Am I letting my ego get in the way? I don't know if that answers your question.
Can I ask you a very question?
Sure. Loudly.
Why do you want to do sustainable design or sustainability?
Why do you? So I've wanted to be an architect since I was 8 years old. And for me, it was all about quality of life. How can I create a beautiful edifice for myself? And then I pretty quickly became clear that if the city that I was part of, or the ecosystem that I was part of, that my house was in, if that wasn't healthy, my house wasn't beautiful. So I figured, well, I better be a planner. So I became an urban planner. And then I became an ecologist. So I had ecology training, urban planning training, as architecture. Because every ring I went out, I realized, well, if I'm in a beautiful ecosystem or a beautiful city, but they're screwing up the environment around the larger environment, then I don't have a beautiful place to live. It's not quality of life. So it kind of was all about me. You know, it's all ultimately all about me. So I realized that I had to be engaged to create quality of life for me. I actually had to engage to create quality of life for others and the life that we're part of. And that quickly then got me out of myself, saying it's not my job to create quality of life, it's our job to create quality of life.